Chris Landry, I hope all is well. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, Ryan. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Hopefully you're having a great day.
Absolutely. It's hectic. Kind of, we got obviously the big game left, but I was telling somebody on another show earlier today when I was a kid growing up, it was kind of depressing on New Year's night, and the last game that always ended was the Orange Bowl, because even when the Sugar Bowl was – and the Sugar Bowl, as you remember, always floated. There was a time, because I went to several of them growing up. Sometimes it was on New Year's Eve, and then it was during the day. I can remember the Alabama-Penn State game being that great game, the great goal line stand by Bama. And then I remember, Tony Dorsett, who was Dorset at the time, beating Georgia, and that was during the day. And then the Sugar Bowl ended up being at night up against the Orange Bowl, but the Orange Bowl was the last one to end because it had the long halftime show. And so after the Orange Bowl was over, I used to be depressed, because the college season was over, and in some cases, depending upon the calendar, I had to go to school, after that. So it was the next day, and after having time off and watching a bunch of bowl games, it was a lot of fun. But at least now we still have what I think is the two best teams in the country, and they get to square off on Monday night, and we get to talk about it.
There's no doubt. Chris, I cannot wait to get to that game, but I'd love for you to go back and maybe give us some thoughts on what you saw and what you witnessed from Alabama's game against Oklahoma.
Yeah, outside of the first quarter, I didn't think Alabama played nearly as well as I thought they would. I thought they missed a lot of opportunities. I thought they were sloppy in a lot of areas. I thought they dominated early, of course. You build up the 28-point lead. I thought they kind of took a series off, and Oklahoma completes a couple passes, which, by the way, Ryan, against a high-powered offense, if you just a little bit off, one guy just is a little late, boom, and that happened. All of a sudden, it's 28-7. So, and then of course, we get into where it's an 18-point lead, and then it's 11, then it's 18 and 11. And, Alabama was never really threatening the game, in my opinion. I thought it was, clearly Alabama was better. But looking at Alabama and how they played it up to their standards, I think there's a lot of things they need to clean up. I think there's a lot of things that they didn't do nearly as well as they're capable of. I thought they missed opportunities early on offense and mistakes. Oklahoma didn't come close to stopping Alabama. And when Alabama didn't, punch it in, it was because they made mistakes and unforced errors. So that's the first thing. On defense, again, what did we talk about all the time? That, okay, the key is going to be ball control to keep your defense fresh. Well, Alabama's defense shut out Oklahoma, except for that drive that I'm talking about. And even after that, it's field goal. What happened when Alabama made some mistakes on offense, couldn't possess the football? Alabama's defense is back on the field, and on the field again, and on the field again. What happened? Oklahoma comes back down. Then it becomes kind of a, either team that had the ball go up against the other defense. I thought Alabama's defense got gassed. And you can get caught into that, which is why I said all along you don't want to do that. Fortunately for Alabama, they built up that equity of a lead so that it never got below that 11-point, and it was never a threat. Could you imagine, though, Ryan, had they got into that situation and it was a one-possession game? Then it becomes, harem-scarum, because the defense, they're dead legs. They can't stop them, and Oklahoma's now Murray's making a few plays that he wasn't making early. I thought they did a good job containing him. And, but part of what the Big 12 offenses do, and Oklahoma is on a different level, is they tend to wear you down by putting your defense on the field so much and making you have to cover the entire field so much for so long, and then it's such a fast pace between plays, between series, and you get worn down. So I thought Alabama was a little sloppy after the first quarter, but they built up enough of a lead, and maybe just lack of focus, maybe just some mental errors, mistakes, what have you. They had complete control of the game. But all things considered, the type of team that they played, that is not the type of team that they normally see with that type of a quarterback, uniqueness of his skill set, and that type of an offense. They don't see that. So I think it's a credit to how prepared they were. And while they didn't do everything nearly as well, had they played as well as I thought they would have won that game maybe by 25-30. I mean, it was close, Ryan, to being a blowout to where it forget 11 and 18 points. It looked like it was, to me, very, very close, including at the end of the first half and the mistakes. And I thought it was very, very close. That in the early start of the third quarter, and that game might have been a 30-point game. And it's not about style points. It's not about anything other than that. They won the game, but I think in the process, there's some things just from a assignment standpoint, just a focus standpoint, there's some things that the head coach could, kind of get guys focused on because they're playing an opponent that is completely different than Oklahoma, that's more like them in Alabama. And so I think it gives them, look, it's a win. You move on, and then now you get to play for the national championship, and you've got, as if they weren't focused enough, they can focus on things that they didn't do well. But some of that, too, is going to be a little bit different as they play an opponent that schematically runs things quite a bit different than the Sooners do.
We're talking to Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. Chris, were they dialing it back on game plan once they jumped up a little bit? I mean, did you see them change what they did as far as what they called?
Well, yeah, they wanted to control the football. They knew, again, that there are two ways you can go about it. Folks will sit there and say, well, why didn't you just go? Well, they knew that if they didn't dial it down, they were going to get in shootouts and their defense was going to get gassed. And they were right. And that's what happened. So what we said they wanted to avoid, they avoided it only early, but later, again, Oklahoma gets it, they go down and score. Alabama gets it, they go down and score. Where Alabama had the edge because they had an 11 to 18 point cushion, and it just went from 11 to 18, 11 to 18. But they did dial it down. And the reason why they wanted to dial it down is because they wanted to eat the clock. They wanted to keep their defense was on the field too much. Why is it that Oklahoma could do nothing on offense early in the game, but later against the same defense, they're not as effective, right? Because they're dead-legged. And that's the effect of what that type of offense can do for you, do against you. So they did want to dial. They wanted to throttle it down. They wanted to play game control. And, I knew Oklahoma was going to load the box. And when they did, then you saw, because it got a little closer than for comfort, then Alabama said, all right, we need to just go and score points. So, in essence, it was a style thing. When I say that, it wasn't as good, it probably wasn't ideal with what they wanted. Had they been a little bit cleaner early, they have this game by 30, and then they're able to really impose their will, and then it's a big-time blowout that we're talking about that, is almost embarrassing. But because they made some mistakes, Oklahoma had some opportunities, then Alabama's defense is on the field too much, then you get into a situation where Alabama said, well, we need another touchdown. So they go and, they start hitting a couple of plays, and that's great. They score quickly, right? But then what happens after you score quickly? Defense back on the field. Their defense is tired, and then Oklahoma comes back. So they did try to dial it down to try to take the air out of the game, so to speak. And, that was the reason, because they couldn't control it. Well, they had to go and get more points, and they used the passing game to get more points, and that's where it become what I would call somewhat, as people are saying today, well, it was competitive. It really wasn't very competitive when you look at the tape, but it was a lot more competitive than it would have been had Alabama been able to control it a little bit more, and it was really more about Alabama making some mistakes that the tempo and the fast pace that would Oklahoma put you in causes you problems, and that's what they wanted to do. And thank goodness the first quarter was dominant because, as I said, can you imagine if that was a 14-14 game after the first quarter, and then we start getting into shootouts, then it becomes kind of a dangerous moment. It kind of frankly becomes like maybe one of those Clemson games where the defense is no longer great because the defense is gassed rather. So they definitely tried to throttle it down to take the air out, and they wasn't quite able to do that, and that's what led to them saying, well, we just need to score more points. And, of course, they could have scored points till the cows come home in the game, and it just would have been – then it would have gotten into one of those 70 to 50 type games.
Chris,
but obviously they controlled it enough that it didn't get completely out of hand.
I don't want to chase tails here for just a couple of minutes, but, I mean, you're the guy that we can kind of pick our brain for a little bit, okay? Because Nick Saban talked about it in the post-game press conference, but I was in that room, and he talked about how he kept telling his players that we're going to have to continue to play at the level. But listen, we're talking about a very group of smart individual players. I mean, they know the game plan. Don't you think they can kind of feel if they're dialing it back? And mentality-wise, if you feel like your coaching staff is dialing it back, maybe there's just human nature for the players to begin to dial it back. Maybe that was some of the reason that they kind of let up on the pedal.
Well, to me, dialing it back, maybe we have a different view of dialing it back. When I say dialing it back is, listen, let's not be in a hurry to score. Let's wear their rear end out at the line of scrimmage, and let's score using, 5-minute drives, because as we do that, we still end up with the same result at the end of the drive, but we get the advantage of getting our defense a little time to rest their legs a little bit. They weren't quite able to do that. So when I say dial it back, it doesn't mean to let up. I think it means, not aggressively try to attack with the passing game, but aggressively try to attack with the running game, which, Ryan, is a tougher thing to do, is to physically impose your will on somebody, but it is something that I thought Alabama had a distinct advantage on. So I don't know that it was that. Maybe it was. Maybe it kind of broke their rhythm a little bit. Absolutely is true. But to me, I thought the issue was, frankly, a little bit different than most people do. I thought the issue was 28-0. They had a bad series defensively and gave up a cheap score, 28-7. It gave them life. Then you come back down, and you got a chance to go and score a touchdown. You make a couple of mistakes. I know there's some calls there that were questionable. But to me, the halftime score should have been 35-0. Or 35-3 at the most. And that's where it's a little bit, a little crack in the door. Not much. But if it's 35-3, then you're one series away in the third quarter from being able to put this game completely away. And so it's a different type of game, whereas as opposed to this, it becomes a little bit, like I said, they get it down to 18, they get it down to 11, then it's back up to 18. But see, I thought they made the adjustments in the game to say, all right, look, we're not able to control this offensively at the line of scrimmage, so we need to go out and score points. And then we'll take our chances. So it went up to 18, down to 11, to 18. That's how the game played out. But, I don't know that they dialed it back in terms of intensity. I just think you change your approach of how you wanted to do it. Do you want to get into a shootout to continue that? Continue to score a bunch of points quickly against them and put your defense back on the field where you give up points? Or do you want to control the football and not sit on it and kick field goals, but control it, work the short passing game, make them run around, wear them down, and use long sustained drives? See, that would have taken the game and shortened the game completely. They wouldn't have had the possessions to even make the game an 18 or 11-point game, in my view. It's not a criticism. It's an observation of how the game played out, but I don't know if it affected their intensity or their focus. I don't see why it would have. I just don't think they executed it very well. I don't think it was a really particularly clean game for Alabama. I don't know if it's – I can't really put my finger on why it wasn't as good a performance from Alabama's standpoint as they normally put, but I think maybe having a different style of team to prepare for probably had something to do with it. They still didn't have any real threat to them losing this game. So it's maybe a moot point, but just as you try to get down to the minutiae and evaluating the tape, as I did, that's kind of how I saw the game play out, and maybe some of the reasons why it went the way it did.
Chris, when we look at Clemson, and I've asked this a couple of times today, hypothetically, you look at Clemson's schedule, and I know they're a great football team. Don't get me wrong; they played 3 ranked teams and really got a break when we talk about playing Notre Dame in the college football semifinals. Do we know a lot about this football team? Do you feel like we do, and maybe have they been battle tested?
Well, I don't know about battle tested, but I don't know that. I think it's a little bit overplayed, in that I think they're really good. Let me tell you why. I think they're very, very talented, and I think they're experienced in some key areas, not at quarterback, but quarterback seems to play kind of like the young quarterback in Tuscaloosa that you think, as a senior, this kid has got ice water in his veins and he's, gravitated. I know being there in the spring, they told me, watch this kid, because I knew how talented Trevor was, but watch how the team just gravitates towards him. And they knew early on they had something special. You play who you play. It's a fair point, and the answer to that's going to come up Monday night in terms of, how do they look. But the reality is they can match up against Alabama personnel-wise. I mean, in most cases, most teams, they just don't match up. And, Clemson does. I mean, Clemson's defensive line is every bit as talented as Alabama's. I don't think the secondary is quite as good as Alabama's. But the front is very good, and offensive line's good. Great back. I don't think they have the depth of backs quite as good, but that are playing consistently for them. But when we're talking about a team that is, we've seen Clemson and Alabama play 2 national championship games, and both teams think they should have won both games because it was that close. So to me, I don't look at it so much as, well, they haven't played anybody. I don't look at them and say they're unbeaten because they played a weak ACC schedule. Okay? They're really good, and had they played tougher teams, they'd still be unbeaten. They just maybe wouldn't have beaten teams quite as badly. But, no, I think they're really good. I think I know a lot about this team. I think this team is very, very talented. They're very good. They're very dangerous. And they're capable of beating Alabama. I think that they're going to have to play their best game. I think Alabama's been a little bit better in these moments, but it's going to come down to me to both quarterbacks have a bevy of weapons at receiver. My goodness, the receivers in this game, it's the sight to behold. I mean, these are guys that are big, that are athletic, that are quick. Good luck, trying to get a good night's sleep defensively, coming up with a plan on both sides of the ball, trying to figure out how to defend these receivers at Clemson and Alabama. This is going to be unbelievable. The key is going to be the protection up front and how well the offensive lines match up against the base pressure of the opposition. You give either one of these quarterbacks time with those receivers, they're going to make plays, and they're going to be big plays. If you put pressure, the ball has to come out quickly, then that's where you're going to have to make it work for you defensively. I do think that Tua's a little bit better with play extension because he's a little bit quicker, more athletic, so he can maybe buy time a little bit more against pressure than maybe Lawrence can. But, everyone will focus on, the quarterback play will be key. It will be pivotal. But the success of the quarterback play, as it always is going to be tied to the protection. So these two teams are really, really good. And I think the fact that, the other thing I'll say is, people may say, that they're not intimidated. Most teams get intimidated by playing Alabama. It's in their head. Clemson doesn't look at Alabama as, they say it. I know Dabble talks about it. Oh, yeah, it's Alabama. They look at themselves as an equal to Alabama. They look at themselves as we're just as good. Now, they haven't won the titles that Alabama has, but from a confidence level standpoint, they're not going to be intimidated by Alabama. So I think that is something that, and I for that matter, I think Georgia kind of does the same thing. But, Clemson, they've got one win against Alabama and a very close one, a close loss. So that's why they're confident. But, it's still a case of Alabama is done it a little bit more successfully. But, I look at this game maybe a little bit differently than some of the other games in which, to me, it was clearly a case of Alabama is so much better, and it would have to be Alabama playing very poorly, which they rarely do, for people to beat them. I think that both of these teams could play very well, and it could go down to the fourth quarter with the game in doubt, and it's going to probably come down to making a play here or there. I thought, for example, that Alabama in last year's championship game would beat Georgia and would probably beat them by about 10. I didn't see them being down and coming back and beating Georgia like they did. I thought they were better, and so it was a little bit of a surprise to me. This is the type of game where it may surprise me again, but I kind of see this as two teams that are pretty even with a slight edge to Alabama in terms of their ability to know how to finish games, and also a big edge, I think, to Alabama playing situational football. I think Alabama's a smarter football team. I think Clemson adjusts well, but I think sometimes they don't adjust quite as well, just at least from the sidelines, as well as Alabama does.
We're talking to Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. Check out the website right now, Rush the Field, which was just posted about 5 hours ago. College football playoff championship preview and bowl recaps. Chris, I want to pick your brain for one, two or more things right here. I mean, this is a national championship. I mean, this is for all the marbles. This is for Nick Saban to go past Coach Paul Bear Bryant and national titles, and it's a historic. We're leaving tomorrow. We're going to be there doing shows from Thursday, Friday, Saturday live in San Jose as we cover Alabama. But let me ask you about this secondary for a couple of minutes, because I know you touched on it a couple of minutes ago. Where would you take this Clemson secondary? Is this a weakness for their football team?
Well, I think the advantages are the depth, the speed, the quickness, the size of the receiving core of both. So I don't think it's I think it's a weak link for Clemson because the defensive front is so much better. I think it's pretty good secondary. I just think there's an advantage when Alabama has the football going up against the receivers of Alabama have advantages over Clemson secondary. If you can find a way to have enough protection to attack them, I think they've got an advantage here. I also think that while Alabama's secondary is better than Clemson's, I think the advantage still goes to Clemson's receivers. It's the receiver advantage here that I think is the difference. But, yes, in short, I think you can throw against Clemson secondary, and I think that the patience of Tua is going to be pivotal because while you've got opportunities to make plays deep, I think more importantly the check down and the run-after-catch option is such a big factor in Alabama's game that I think you can take advantage of a lot of things there and being patient with taking the underneath route that becomes the big gainer.
Chris, who's going to win this game?
I'm leaning right now. I'm working on the breakdowns for the website, and I'm Alabama. It's to me, it's really close. I'm not going to be surprised either way. Again, it's that close to me. But for me, I've just seen Alabama do this too often. You gotta beat Alabama to prove it to me. And I know Clemson's done it, but I think Alabama's a little better in some areas. In other areas, maybe a lot better. In some areas, not quite as good. But I will tell you, I think Alabama wins it, but I'm not nearly as confident as I have been in some other games. And it doesn't mean, it couldn't be one-sided. But I think this is going to be quite the challenge for Alabama. But I think I'm going with the Tide here. I just like their experience. I like some of their matchups. And I like the way Tua played last week and appeared to be healthy. That was something I wanted to see. I'm comfortable enough as long as he's healthy. I think they've got more ability to even make more big plays and to be able to run the football with some balance. I like Alabama.
LandryFootball.com. Chris, take a minute and talk about the awesome website, what you guys are working on in preparation for this gigantic game.
Well, obviously, doing a lot of film room breakdowns, so we're going to have that up in a couple of days, get a little bit closer. We've taken all the bowl games. We've broken down all the games, and so now we're down to the last one. We're going to break that down. Obviously, we also on top of the NFL, so we got a big weekend of the NFL with 4 games, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. We're going to break down those games. We're keeping everybody updated on the coaching search tracker of, mostly in the NFL, but we've got some college news as well that's coming out. Obviously, Dana Holgorsen's leaving, going to Houston. What's West Virginia going to be doing? We've got all that information there. So we're going to break down that game in detail. Obviously, finish out the NFL season with all the breakdowns and have free agency, the draft, and all that. But also for the college fans, we've got a lot of things that we're going to look deeply into doing in this off season as time permits. We're going to obviously finish up recruiting with the second signing day, which is going to be the 20-25% of the guys who haven't signed. We're going to evaluate all that and then evaluate rosters. At that point, we'll know who's coming back, who's going out for the draft definitively, and we'll start to analyze rosters and kind of break down how the rosters stack up, how we as the scout grade the rosters in college. And listen, start thinking about, spring practice, following all the transfer news around college football, and getting ready for all the remaining coaching search news with assistants, and getting ready for spring ball and breaking down rosters so that it's all year long football for us. And it's the playing season and then kind of the personnel season, where the player acquisition season, where you lose players, you sign players, you develop players, the coaching change, all those things we kind of follow, because if you can't be involved in that, it's those things that happen that time of year that determine your success or failure during the season. So we'll be breaking down that for everybody all year long. So you can follow us on Twitter at Landry Football. We got our holiday special that we're keeping on for a little bit. I know holidays are technically over, but holiday season's still here. We got the special up, so take advantage of that before it goes away on the year membership. So if you like football, you'll love LandryFootball.com. College football, NFL, we got it covered.
Chris, you're the best, man. I appreciate you for being a part of the show. Have a great afternoon, sir.
Be safe there. I hope it's nice over there. I don't be surprised if the atmosphere is not all that.
Yeah, well, you seen ticket prices? I mean, they're like bottom. They're like half of what the face value is.
It's just not big college football area. So the excitement is going to come from the people that are involved, the Clemson and the Alabama people that go there, because locally it's, just not I'm not sure that I hope that I'm wrong. I'm just not sure that the atmosphere is going to be what we normally like for the college football finals. But I think the game could be great. Enjoy it, buddy.